Good afternoon. I'm Merrick Masters, and welcome to Presidential Election Watch. Today is June the 3rd, 2024. We live in very interesting times. Presidential election of this year is quite unusual in several respects. It's beginning to remind me a little bit of 1968 with all the turbulence and discord and divisiveness. Three quotes come to mind immediately when I think about this election year. We have met the enemy and he is us. Be careful what you wish for, you just might get it, and the center will not hold. I'm a professor of business emeritus, commentator, and podcaster. You can find me at Merrick Masters on YouTube and X, or Twitter. The topics for today are the Trump verdict, legal reactions to it, political effects of the verdict, where is the Trump campaign, and is Biden on his way off the ticket? Before the verdict came in last week, there was growing speculation in the media about whether the Democrats might replace Biden because of his vulnerabilities. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Trump verdict came in at 5:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Manhattan, New York. The jury found him guilty on all 34 counts. This, in my view, was expected. What remains to be seen is what the sentence will be, and the judge has scheduled the sentencing to take place on July 11th, 2024. Trump has, since the verdict came in, appealed to the Supreme Court asking for it to intervene with its decision on the sentencing. Legal reactions are decidedly mixed. Alan Dershowitz, I think, summed up my feelings about it, and I'm a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat who's run for Congress in 1992 in the old 18th Congressional District of Pennsylvania as a progressive Democrat. But Dershowitz said that the jury got it completely wrong. I don't blame the jury. I blame the prosecution and the judge, who I think were very biased in this case. Dershowitz also said, and you can see his excerpts from a video clip here, that a lot of liberals believe the Trump conviction was unjustified. Whether or not that's the case, I don't know. But as a liberal myself, in the more traditional sense of the word, I do believe that it was unjustified. I think the prosecution was unjustified. Jonathan Turley, a professor from George Washington University, has commented copiously on this trial, which he attended part of, and he says that the inability to get a conviction outside of Manhattan undermines the legitimacy of the Trump verdict. He also has, in a column recently, said the following. So Trump was convicted in a trial with a Biden donor judge who has a daughter who is a major Democratic operative, a lead prosecutor previously paid as a DNC political consultant, and a jury selected in a district that voted roughly 90% against Trump. Turley goes on to say that the trial itself was a travesty. Now, there are opposite views, and I think that one of the most poignant ones was summarized by the dean of the University of California, Berkeley School of Law, who said the following. The Trump verdict is a triumph for the rule of law. The core of the rule of law is that no one, not even a president or a former president, is above the law. Donald Trump repeatedly tried to argue that he was above the law in this case as well as others. The dean of the Berkeley School of Law goes on to say that Donald Trump was convicted on all counts because the evidence was overwhelming that he authorized payment of hush money to Stormy Daniels, illegally concealed it as business records, and did so to help his campaign. There's probably no way of reconciling these competing views, but I think it's certainly open to question the merits of this prosecution and the judge's conduct during the trial. Political effects. These are also mixed. Some initial indicators suggest that it's difficult at this point in time to really determine the effect. There is some who believe that Trump will benefit from this conviction. It will mobilize his base even more. It will make the opposition look particularly overzealous in their prosecution of him to get him off the ballot so that they can win the election of 2024 with Joe Biden as the candidate. Just a few headlines that are in the news recently. One is that the Trump campaign raised $200 million since the New York City Manhattan conviction. Another is that the guilty verdict gives Trump a 6-point bump, at least one poll reveals. Other polls indicate that some independents, Republicans, may shift after guilty verdict. And another headline said 1 in 10 Republicans less likely to vote for Trump after verdict. We're going to have to wait for this to settle. A lot will determine on how Trump is able to respond in the next immediate weeks ahead and whether he's able to get his campaign focused and organized in order to surmount the various obstacles that he faces on the legal front. The Trump trial and conviction, a very bad look for the United States, I think sums up my feelings about it better than any other. Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank says that I think there are many people that feel the way I do that don't think this case should have been brought on its merits at all because it wasn't worthy of tainting the American brand, because that's what it did and that's what it's doing. It's making us look like a third world country. And for those who support the prosecution and President Biden, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it, because the more we look like a third world country with dictators going after their political opposition and trying to imprison them, the more I think that makes Biden vulnerable, because people will connect the open borders with rising crime, with the prevalence of a third world country. That, along with concerns about the direction of the country, will cause, I think, some to have even more reservations about whether Biden should be reelected. However, there are real concerns, I think, about the status of the Trump campaign. The prosecution of Trump affects more than just the campaign itself, in the sense that it affects the money it can raise, positively or negatively, or that it affects the polls in terms of how the public views his electability and desirability as a president. One of the most difficult challenges that you face is when you're under a constant barrage of trials, and Trump has been under 7 trials over the past several months, with several still remaining or under appeal. And I think that they can be summed up in terms of its likely effect as atrophy. The trials create media events. They divert attention away from the issues. They drain time, money, and energy. They make it difficult for a candidate to focus. They make it difficult for supporters to focus. And you may ask yourself, what is the status of the campaign in terms of building the infrastructure that they'll need? With so much of the electorate already baked in the cake, and the decision to be made by perhaps 5% of the undecideds, and the extent to which both camps, the Biden camp and the Trump camp, can get their voters out on election day, you need a strong infrastructure to support your candidate. And Steve Bannon, who is an emissary of President Trump, said recently, I don't see a campaign. Trump needs a serious strategy meeting. He is quoted as saying, I think he's got to sit down with his campaign, and I'll be brutally frank, quoting Bannon. I don't see a campaign. I don't see it in the states. I really don't see a campaign in the campaign. What I see is people coming up with amazing events like they've had in the New York City area. I think he has to have a very serious strategy meeting, and I think it ought to be tomorrow. Time's a waiting. If Trump really wants to win, he's going to have to turn out the vote. This will be a very close election, as we'll talk about in a minute. As I mentioned earlier, there was speculation in the media before the verdict, through all the speculation off the headlines, about whether Biden would be replaced on his ticket. Some Democrats were talking about his undesirability as a general election candidate. This speculation is due to his poor polling, questions about his fitness for office, also related to poor polling, his lack of enthusiasm, or the lack of enthusiasm of his supporters. When you really think about it, and I was a Biden supporter in 1987, not many people can say that, but he doesn't really have much of an enthusiastic base, certainly not compared to Trump, and they will have to really drag out the vote on election day to get people to show up and want to vote for him. And also there's concern about whether the country is moving in the wrong direction. There was a poll by Rasmussen that said that 54% of the Democrats, this is before the verdict came in, now approve of dumping Biden. That's a pretty strong number. Polls in terms of the two parties, are the Biden versus Trump race, indicate that it's a statistical dead heat, with Trump having a slight lead over Biden, but it's minuscule. In a five-person race with Kennedy in the race, Trump has a slightly larger margin, but it's still a very close race. So anything can happen between now and November, and both parties are going to have to work, all the candidates are going to have to work hard at getting their vote out. What this particular poll suggests is that Trump's chances may be a little bit better if Kennedy's in the race across most of the states. Now, there's also a poll about the direction of the country, and this is not very good for Biden. It shows that only 24.1% of the public believe the country is heading in the right direction, whereas 65.8% believe it's heading in the wrong direction. Biden also polls unfavorably in terms of his specific policies, such as on the economy, immigration, foreign policy, and inflation. All of these things raise questions about whether the Republicans or the Democrats should look for an alternative candidate. And I might add parenthetically that I think that concerns about President Biden will surface even more if he doesn't have a very good debate performance in June, when they're scheduled to have their first debate. If he has a dismal performance or underperforms, and the expectations aren't very great, so he doesn't have to do very well to meet those expectations. But if he underperforms, I think many Democrats will view that it is their obligation, in order to defeat Trump, to replace him at the convention when they meet in August. A little bit about myself. I'm a professor of business, as I noted. I've been affiliated with 3 universities. I'm a professor emeritus now, just officially as of May the 15th, retired from Wayne State University. I've held a number of administrative positions, including the director of the Doug Fraser Center for Workplace Issues. I have interest in business, labor, politics. I'm working on a book now on how Richard Nixon rose from political ashes, and also on the new United Auto Workers. I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel on Merrick Masters on YouTube. You can also find me on Twitter there. You can see my various webcasts on labor news at work, UAW Organizing Watch, Presidential Election Watch, as this video concerns. And coming later this week, starting this week, a series of videos that I'm doing on Nixon's the One, a story about his comeback in 1968 to the presidency. Episode 1 focuses on the announcement. My second episode, which will also appear later this week, will be on Robert F. Kennedy and his assassination and death nearly 56 years ago today in a tragic incident in American politics. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast and will subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I look forward to talking with you in the future. Take care and have a good evening.